Mr. George, with your connections in the industry, it's honestly a shame you're still just managing the sales division, the client said with a smile, raising his glass. If you're ever interested, the president's seat at one of our subsidiaries is yours for the taking. His offer was generous, and the look in his eyes made it clear, he meant every word. I'll think about it, I said with an easy smile, lifting my glass in return. But Mr. Vanderbilt, let's get that contract signed first. Once this export deal was finalized, I could finally take a break. And there were a few personal matters I intended to settle while I had the time. Just as I was thinking that, the door to the private dining room was abruptly pushed open. Do you have any idea who this is? This is Anna Collins, president of Oceanmark Group. You don't even have a private room for her, a man's voice rang out arrogantly. He was tall, decently handsome, but had that overgroomed, slick look that screamed vanity. He strutted in, holding a woman tightly in his arms, and that woman was none other than my wife, Anna Collins. She was clearly drunk, her eyes glassy, her steps unsteady. But what caught my eye more than anything was the way her hand clung tightly to his waist. The man was Henry, her assistant. George? What are you doing here? Henry asked, as if I were the one intruding, his tone laced with accusation. Business meeting, I replied calmly, my expression unchanged. A good businessman knows how to manage his emotions, especially when his wife might be cheating on him. There'd been rumors in the company for weeks. After all, Anna had randomly found an excuse to gift Henry a brand new Maserati under the company's name. I'd confronted her about it, told her if she'd fallen for someone else, she should just say it and we'd get a clean divorce. But she swore up and down that there was nothing going on. Even threatened to take her own life to prove her innocence. I believed her. And yet now, here she was, clinging to him in front of everyone. When Anna heard my voice, she abruptly pushed Henry away, a flicker of panic flashing in her eyes. But instead of offering an explanation, she lashed out, her voice sharp with embarrassment and anger. George, are you following me? Try using a little logic, I said, gesturing toward the half-finished meal and open wine bottle on the table. I've been here nearly an hour with a client. If I were following you, how could I possibly get here first? Mr. Vanderbilt quickly chimed in, trying to defuse the tension. Yes, Miss Collins, George and I have been here for quite some time. He looked awkward, understandably so, anyone with half a brain could see what was going on. But beneath his discomfort, I caught something else in his expression. Excitement. I guess he's hoping that I'll get divorced and go to his company. Who the hell do you think you are? Henry snapped, jabbing a finger toward Mr. Vanderbilt. This conversation doesn't concern you. Keep your mouth shut. Then he turned to Anna with exaggerated concern. Anna, come on, George definitely knew you'd be coming here. He knew you liked this private room, so he deliberately got here first just to embarrass you in front of everyone. You're disgusting, George, so calculated and petty. Anna cut in without hesitation, pointing at me with fire in her eyes. I can't believe you're still this insecure. How many times have I told you? There's nothing between Henry and me, we're just colleagues. But you refuse to trust me, ever. Vanderbilt's expression darkened. His jaw clenched, and there was a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes, a quiet fury beneath his otherwise composed demeanor. He wasn't just a polite businessman in a suit. He'd built his trade empire in some of the most volatile regions in the world. The man had cut his teeth negotiating deals where a wrong move could cost you your life. He wasn't the kind you wanted to insult in public, especially not in front of a client. I gently placed a hand on Vanderbilt's arm, giving him a slight nod. Then I stood up and calmly walked over to face Anna and Henry directly. Henry immediately bristled, pointing at me again. George, you couldn't stand being exposed, so you're angry now? Anna's eyes flared as she glared at me. George, do you not trust me at all? Even now, after everything, she still had the nerve to ask that. Trust or not, I said coolly, loosening my tie and meeting Henry's gaze without flinching, is the least of our concerns right now. I took a slow step forward, my voice like ice. The real issue is, Henry, you owe Mr. Vanderbilt an apology. Now. Me? Apologize to him? Henry let out a smug laugh. I'm Anna's assistant. And he's just a client of some mid-level sales manager like you. What makes you think he deserves an apology from me? I'll make sure you do. I nodded slowly, then moved. In one swift motion, I grabbed Henry by the hair and yanked him off his feet, tossing him across the room like dead weight. Before he could even regain his balance, I drove my foot into the back of his knee, forcing him to collapse right in front of Mr. Vanderbilt. Then, without missing a beat, I smashed a wine bottle against the edge of the table. The glass shattered in my hand, jagged and gleaming. I pressed the sharp edge right against Henry's face. "I'll say this one last time," I said coldly. "Apologize, or I swear I'll ruin you." "I'm sorry, Mr. Vanderbilt." Henry blurted out, his voice cracking with terror. He was shaking all over, and to everyone's horror, he'd pissed himself. Mr. Vanderbilt didn't say a word at first. He stood up, calmly buttoned his suit jacket, then gave me a long, approving look. "George," he said, his tone steady and deliberate, "my offer stands. Anytime you're ready, just call me. Take care of your family business first." With that, he turned and walked out. Anna let out a shriek and rushed over to Henry, dropping to her knees beside him. She glared up at me, her face twisted in fury. "George, have you lost your damn mind? You actually hit Henry? I don't care how mad you are, this is going too far." "Mad?" I leaned back into my chair, slowly wiping my hands clean with a silk napkin. "You've got it all wrong, Anna. I'm not mad at all." I met her gaze, calm as ever. "I hit him because he disrespected my client. And every one of my clients is part of my network, my lifeblood. I protect that, no matter what. That's all this was." Not a flicker of emotion crossed my face. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Did that mean I didn't love Anna anymore? Of course not. If I hadn't loved her, I never would have spent years building my business just to put her on a pedestal, handing her a CEO title so she could hold her head high in any room. But I'm also a rational man. And when something dirty creeps into a marriage, I cut it out, clean and fast. "Why aren't you angry?" Anna's voice trembled with confusion, as if she couldn't make sense of my calm. I gave her a cold glance, my tone flat and merciless. "Anna, when I loved you, you were the stars in my sky. But the moment you cheated, you became trash. And no one gets angry over trash. You're calling me trash?" Her voice cracked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Wait, are you saying you don't love me anymore?" The fear in her face was unmistakable. I lit a cigarette, crossed my legs, and leaned back in the chair, utterly indifferent. "We've been together 7 years, haven't we? You should know me better than anyone. I wouldn't even wear a shirt my brother's worn. What makes you think I'd stay with a woman another man's touched?" I stood up, flicking the ash from my cigarette. I'd said enough. I haven't been touched by anyone else. Anna ran after me, grabbing me from behind, her arms wrapped tightly around my waist. "George, you've got it all wrong. Nothing happened between me and Henry. I was just drunk, he was only helping me walk." I frowned, repulsed by the contact, and let the cigarette slip from my fingers. It dropped straight onto the back of her hand. She cried out in pain, releasing me instinctively. "You were all over each other, do you really think that still needs explaining?" I said coldly. "I've made countless deals when I was drunk, but have you ever seen me relying on another woman for support?" I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "I'll have my attorney draft the divorce papers. We're done." "No. I'm not getting a divorce." Anna broke down, sobbing, but she didn't dare try to stop me again. Henry rushed to her side, puffing up his chest like a hero in a bad movie. "Don't worry, Anna. You're the company's CEO, if he tries anything, just fire him. He's nothing but a leech living off your paycheck. What's there to be afraid of?" Before heading back to the office, I made a few calls to our shareholders. But the moment I stepped through the door, I noticed something off. Every employee I passed looked at me differently. Not quite pity, not quite curiosity, something in between. I didn't bother reacting. I went straight to my office. Marcus, the deputy director of sales, stormed in almost immediately, thrusting his phone toward me. "Look at this," he said. It was a message in the company's internal group chat. Henry had posted it himself. "Sales Director George has been terminated." No wonder the stares. Marcus scowled. "Seriously, George, whose company is this, anyway? This place is turning into a circus. Thanks to your wife, it's chaos. Everyone's talking about her sleeping around, and now that smug bastard Henry's walking around like he owns the place. If this keeps up, my family's pulling our investment." "I've got it under control," I said, waving him off. "Go back to work." Still, Marcus hesitated. "If you're feeling pissed, I can grab some drinks with you later." I smiled faintly. Why would I punish myself with alcohol when I haven't done anything wrong? Then I added, "Relax. I've already spoken to your father, on the way back. That seemed to ease him a little. He nodded and turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. By the way, he said almost as an afterthought, Selena's back. To be honest, I still think she should be your wife. I didn't respond. Just turned back to my work. When I finally finished, I had the driver take me home. The moment I stepped inside, I was greeted by the smell of food wafting from the kitchen, warm, inviting, almost nostalgic. Then came Anna's voice, sweet and familiar. George? Is that you? I made your favorite tonight, go wash up. I laughed under my breath. A bitter, cold laugh. Because right there by the front door, I saw another pair of men's shoes. Henry's. Was this woman completely out of her mind? She actually had the nerve to bring him into my house? I changed my shoes and walked in. In the kitchen, I saw Henry holding a slice of steak up to Anna's lips, feeding her like they were in some honeymoon phase. She was beaming, her face lit up with the kind of joy that only comes from being in love. The moment she saw me, her smile vanished. George, wait, it's not what you think, she blurted, clearly flustered. I just couldn't use my hands, so I asked Henry to help me check the seasoning. No need to explain. I pulled the divorce papers out of my briefcase and laid them on the kitchen counter. Just sign it, and we'll get a divorce tomorrow. Anna stared at me, stunned. George, are you really going through with this? Before she could say more, Henry jumped in, his voice sharp and self-righteous. Unbelievable. You've got some nerve, George. Anna lowered herself to cook for you, trying to make peace, and you still act like you're above her? He jabbed a finger at me. I even came here personally to apologize. What more do you want, huh? You think you're so important? Don't push your luck. I let out a low laugh. Taking off my blazer, I calmly unstrapped my watch, then loosened my tie. Henry, you really think too highly of yourself. You came here to apologize, so what? Is your apology worth a damn? His face twisted in disdain. And what makes you better than me? I'm an executive assistant to the CEO, second only to the top, he said smugly. You? You're just a sales manager. If you weren't married to Anna, you wouldn't even qualify to speak in the same room as me. And then, he charged at me. I met him with a single kick, sending him stumbling backward. But the idiot got up and lunged again, this time grabbing onto my arm, leaning in close, whispering through gritted teeth, "Go ahead, hit me. The more you lose your temper, the worse you'll look in front of Anna. And when you're out of the picture, I'll be the one she marries." I chuckled again, calm, amused, not even angry anymore. I brushed his hand off my arm and patted his shoulder lightly. Henry, have you been watching too many soap operas? What the hell does that mean? He looked genuinely confused. I shook my head, still smiling. Forget it. Let's just get everyone together and settle this properly. Not long after, the entire Collins family arrived. Truth be told, Anna's parents had always treated me well. I didn't come from wealth, but everything I have now, I built from the ground up. Every dollar, every asset, every piece of respect I command in this city is mine and mine alone. It has nothing to do with the Collins family. That's probably why they'd always held me in high regard. George, what's going on here? Mr. Collins asked, rubbing his hands anxiously. He'd heard I was filing for divorce, and the news had clearly shaken him. I nodded toward Anna and Henry. They've been involved. And this guy, Henry, just tried to provoke me into hitting him, hoping I'd lose control in front of Anna so she'd see me as violent and unworthy. His goal? To replace me. He actually believes he can marry into this family. Mr. Collins' face turned stone cold. Mrs. Collins spun toward Henry, her voice sharp and furious. You pathetic little parasite. You really think you can climb the social ladder by pulling cheap tricks like that? You're not even close to being worthy. Mr. Collins's jaw clenched tight. I'd rather disown my own daughter than let you into the Collins family. Just then, Nate Collins walked in, Anna's younger brother. He must have already been briefed, because his expression was ice. George, he said calmly, leave it to me. I'll make sure this guy disappears. Henry turned pale. He hadn't expected the Collins family to stand so firmly on my side. Anna, say something, he cried, desperate now. But Anna ignored him completely. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at me. George. I know I messed up. Please, just give me one more chance. Henry, refusing to give up, snapped back, this isn't fair. I come from nothing, same as George. Why is he accepted and I'm not? What makes him so special? Listen up, Nate said sharply, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. George started his first business back in college, small, sure, but he refused to take a dime from our family. Never asked for favors, never rode our coattails. And when his business grew, he stepped aside and gave Anna the CEO title, just so she could hold her head high. We've seen every step of his journey, from a broke college kid to the man he is now. He earned every bit of it. And you? Nate sneered, turning to Henry. What the hell are you? A leech who thinks seducing a married woman is your shortcut to wealth? He let out a cold laugh. Here's a little something to crush whatever hope you've got left. Even if Anna did marry you one day, you'd still have nothing. Colin's family assets don't go to outsiders. Don't forget, I'm the heir, not her. Henry's face drained of color. You could see the despair sinking in. Even Anna didn't bother defending him now. I looked him dead in the eye and said, people who lack real ability but chase shortcuts, are worthless, no matter what class they come from. Then I turned to the Collins family. This marriage ends here. That's final. They looked disappointed, but in the end, they had no choice but to take Anna away with them. I could tell, deep down, Anna still didn't want the divorce. But regret that comes too late is just that, too late. And me? Was I heartbroken? Sure, after years of marriage, you don't walk away without feeling something. But I wasn't about to torture myself over it. I got a good night's sleep and showed up early at the office the next morning. One of the staff stopped me as I walked in. Mr. George, Miss Collins just called an emergency board meeting. She asked that you head straight to the conference room. What does she want to do? I walked into the room, and saw Henry sitting in my chair. The board members glanced at me, some awkward, others unreadable. There was a strange tension in the air. I didn't react. I simply picked an empty seat and sat down. Then I looked toward Anna, who now sat at the head of the table. What's this about? I asked calmly. Anna's face was cold, her eyes locked on mine. George, I'm giving you two options, she said, her voice sharp and unyielding. Either resign, or stay married to me. Divorce, I answered without the slightest hesitation. Anna's hands trembled in fury, but she managed to steady herself. Fine. Then I hereby announce your immediate termination from all positions within Oceanmark Group. Henry's face lit up with smug satisfaction. He leaned back in the chair that used to be mine and gave me a mocking look. Guess what, George? I may not get anything from the Collins family, he said, grinning, but this company's going to be mine. This company's going to be yours? I let out a soft chuckle, my tone casual, almost bored. And who exactly do you think you are? I glanced at Henry with quiet disdain. You really believe Anna's going to marry you? Henry looked smug, certain of his place beside her. But then he turned toward Anna, expecting her to back him up. Instead, her voice cut through the room like ice. I've said it before, there's nothing between us. You're just my assistant. Don't get it twisted. What? Henry blinked in disbelief. Anna? What are you saying? You heard me, she said, her expression cold and unflinching. Nothing ever happened between us. And even if something had, even if George and I got divorced for real, I still wouldn't marry someone like you. Henry froze, stunned. What do you mean, someone like me? I mean a man who tries to use women as a shortcut to wealth, Anna replied flatly. You think I didn't see right through you? She held his gaze, unforgiving. The only reason I ever gave you attention was because George stopped looking at me the way he used to. I was trying to get a reaction out of him. That's all. She gave a dry, bitter smile. I even went to that restaurant on purpose. I knew George would be there. I let you hold me just so he'd see it. Normally, I wouldn't even let you near me. Why do you think that night was any different? Henry's face turned pale. His entire world collapsed in an instant. He stood there like a ghost, hollow and speechless. Anna turned back to me. Her voice softened, trembling slightly. George, there's nothing between him and me. I just wanted you to feel something, anything. I know I took it too far, but you know how much I love you. Please, just give me one more chance. Divorce, I said quietly, my voice calm, unreadable. She flinched, but I didn't waver. Once I've made up my mind, I don't look back. I don't second guess. And in this case, I meant every word. Because even if all of it was just a show, even if she and Henry had never crossed a line, she still let him touch her. And that alone was something I could never forgive. Everyone has a line they don't cross. She crossed mine. And there was no going back from that. George, if you insist on the divorce, Anna said, trying to steady her voice, then I have no choice but to fire you. This company, you're the one who built it from the ground up. I know better than anyone how much it means to you. I shook my head and let out a slow, amused laugh. You're right, you're the CEO. But I own 65% of this company. Which means I'm the one in control here, and you? You're nothing. That shut her up. She froze, as if the realization had just hit her. Back when we were still in good standing, I'd planned to transfer half the company's shares to her. But the board pushed back, hard. Why? Because of the Collins family's size and influence. If Anna had held that much equity, combined with her status as the legal representative, she could have easily brought in outside capital and diluted everyone else's shares. In that scenario, the other shareholders would have taken the biggest hit. But me? They trusted me. Most of those board members were my original backers, the people who bet on me when I was just starting out. They knew my values. They knew I didn't play games. The Collins family, on the other hand, was all business, ruthless, transactional, and hard to trust. So the shares stayed with me. I pointed toward the conference room door. That'll be all. You've been stripped of all executive roles. Now get out, this meeting doesn't concern you anymore. Anna just sat there, stunned, helpless. Her lips moved like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Eventually, she just slumped in her chair, completely deflated. I turned to Henry. And you, starting to get the picture now? His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Not even a weak excuse. I didn't bother with either of them anymore. I picked up the phone and called security. Get them out, I said. And just like that, they were gone. The board meeting wrapped up smoothly, and the shareholders left looking pleased. But inside the company, there was a different kind of tension brewing, a quiet sense of unease spreading through the halls. I asked around, and soon found the source. Someone had been spreading rumors, claims that the Collins family was the majority stakeholder in the company, and that they were planning to pull out, leaving the business on the verge of collapse. Most of the senior and mid-level management knew better. They understood who really held the reins. But the lower-level staff didn't have the full picture. Some were panicking, others uncertain, whispers of layoffs started making the rounds. I had Marcus look into it. Didn't take long to trace the rumors back to Anna's people. Of course. She'd been the CEO for years, it wasn't hard for her to quietly place a few loyal followers inside the company. They'd always been in minor roles, so I'd never paid them much attention. I trusted her too much back then to ever suspect sabotage. But now, all at once, they were making noise, enough to cause a bit of disruption. It didn't matter. They were small players, easy to remove. And that's exactly what we did. One by one, they were fired and driven out of the company. A formal company-wide notice followed, publicly clarifying that I, not the Collins family, held controlling ownership. The staff calmed down after that. Stability returned. But as I sat alone in the CEO's office, something still lingered in the air, an uncomfortable heaviness I couldn't shake. The desk in front of me was still covered in framed photos, pictures of Anna and me. Most were from our college days. Smiling faces. Bright eyes. Memories frozen in time. I took a deep breath and reached for the intercom, intending to have someone come clear them out. But then I noticed a journal tucked between two photo frames. I opened it. Anna's handwriting. There weren't many entries, just short thoughts, scribbled on quiet days. But they hit harder than I expected. George is always busy these days. It's been so long since we watched a movie together. The business doesn't really matter that much, does it? We already have more than enough to live a good life. There was a new intern here today. He tried to flirt with me. It was hilarious. Maybe I'll use him to make George jealous. That should get his attention. I closed the journal slowly and set it aside. No, I wasn't second-guessing myself. The divorce was still happening. But there was a pang. A faint ache I couldn't quite ignore. She must have forgotten, years ago, I'd promised her that by the time I turned 40, I'd make enough money for us to retire and travel the world together. That was the whole reason I'd pushed so hard. Why I'd poured so much of myself into the business. She thought I'd just stopped loving her. But I was chasing a dream she'd already let go of. Just then, there was a knock on the office door. And in walked Selina. She was Marcus's younger sister, 5 years younger than me. I still remembered her coming-of-age party years ago, when she'd had a bit too much to drink and quietly confessed her feelings to me. That night, she'd said, "George, I'd never do anything to ruin what you have with Anna. But you were my first real crush, and I'd regret it if I never told you. Don't feel pressured, I'm leaving the country anyway." I hadn't felt burdened by it at the time. In fact, I'd always admired her sincerity, that bold honesty wrapped in grace. And now, years later, she had grown into a stunning woman. "George," she said softly, almost shyly. "Marcus mentioned you might need an assistant, so he asked me to help out." I gave a small nod. "All right. Have someone prepare a new office for me. And everything in here." My eyes scanned the desk one last time, our photos, that journal, the past. "Burn it," I said quietly. Just like that, ready to close the door behind everything that used to be. I left the company shortly after and headed home. First thing I did was have Anna's belongings packed up, everything she'd left behind. But it was impossible not to notice how deeply she'd embedded herself into every corner of this place. Matching toothbrushes still sat side by the sink. Those soft, oversized his and hers pajamas were folded neatly in the closet. The kitchen was still filled with her carefully chosen cookware, everything arranged just the way she liked it. Even the refrigerator door hadn't changed. Sticky notes with her handwriting were still posted there, small, delicate letters, each one a quiet love note. Page after page, she'd written how much she loved me. For a moment, I hesitated. Maybe she really did deserve another chance. The thought crept in like a whisper. A flicker of doubt, a trace of longing. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Attached was a photo, Anna, topless on a beach, her back bare, while Henry rubbed sunscreen into her shoulders. Beneath it was a short video. I opened it. And instantly, I cursed myself for being a fool. For even considering forgiveness just moments ago. As if on cue, Anna and Henry showed up again. Henry dropped straight to his knees the moment he walked in. "Mr. George, I came here to apologize," he said, his voice trembling. "Yes, I tried to use Anna to climb the ladder. But just like she told you, she never gave me a real chance. I've lost everything now. But I still have a conscience. I'm just here to ask you, please, don't hold it against her." With that, he lowered his head to the floor and started bowing over and over again. Anna stood behind him, crying. "George. I know I've made terrible mistakes. But please, please give me another chance." I turned off my phone and set it aside, as if I'd never seen what Marcus sent. "Let's get divorced," I said quietly. "It's the best ending we can have." Anna shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, George, I'm not getting a divorce. Even if you won't give me another chance, at least give one to our child. I'm pregnant. I'm carrying our baby." I stared at her for a moment. "You're sure you don't want a divorce?" She nodded, clinging to hope. I gave a slow nod in return. "All right, then we won't divorce." Henry immediately jumped in, voice urgent and pleading. "Mr. George, you have my word, I'll disappear from your lives completely." And with that, he ran out like a man desperate to escape his own mess. Anna broke down in joyful sobs. I said nothing. Just quietly instructed the staff to stop packing and return everything to its place. Anna rushed to the kitchen to cook for me, eager to please. But halfway through, I was already grabbing my keys to leave. "George, where are you going?" she asked, her voice soft, almost pitiful. I glanced at her. "Selina's back. We've made plans to have dinner together." She froze, eyes wide with disbelief. "But George, she likes you. Don't you think you should keep some distance?" I looked at her calmly. "Leave me alone. Or, choose the other option. Divorce." Anna bit her lip, her expression tight. "I won't get in your way, George. I trust you." I nodded without a word and walked out. As for Selina, yes, we really had dinner plans. She'd said she missed the little greasy spoon diner near her old high school, so that's where we went. The food was heavy, spicy, and unapologetically greasy. We washed it down with ice-cold beer. But halfway through the meal, we both clutched our stomachs. Bad idea. The place had only one bathroom, so we ended up taking turns, both of us miserably waiting outside the door like kids at summer camp. By the time we left, we were both completely drained. Selina, dressed in a flowing white sundress, sighed as she climbed into the car. This reunion wasn't romantic at all. I chuckled and nodded. The owner actually asked me if we were frying French fries in the bathroom. French fries? She blinked, then suddenly realized. You mean, the sounds? Her face turned beet red, but she couldn't stop laughing. We were too wiped out to walk anymore, so we got in the car and I had the driver take her home. But before I could head back myself, Marcus showed up and dragged me out for drinks. I popped an anti-diarrheal pill just to be safe, then sat down for food and whiskey with him. A little while later, Selina joined us too. George, did the deal with Mr. Vanderbilt go smoothly? Marcus asked while eating. I nodded. We're solid. I've got a strong relationship with him. Last year, his security firm overseas had a major equipment shortage. I was the one who connected him with the supplier. That settled things. We've had a strong rapport ever since. Good, Marcus grinned. That order's massive, worth almost 3 years of profits for us. Then he suddenly switched gears. Business, I don't worry about with you. But this marriage situation, what's your plan, man? I just smiled, saying nothing. Under the table, Selina kicked him lightly. Marcus winced and cleared his throat. Anyway. I've said it before, I think you and Selina are a great match. Do with that what you will. Marcus. Selina squealed, pretending to be embarrassed, though she couldn't hide her smile. Marcus gave her a teasing glare, then looked at me again. She's never gotten over you, you know. Ever since that night she confessed to you, she hasn't dated anyone else. Maybe it's fate. I leaned back, still smiling. One step at a time. Everything needs room to grow. After more than half a month of getting along, Selina and I confirmed our relationship. Because she was too proactive, I was a little overwhelmed. But I still hadn't finalized the divorce with Anna. Sometimes, I'd still go home. And yes, there were times I even brought Selina with me. Anna would just watch quietly, never raising her voice, never confronting me. But I could see the tears she tried to hide. As her belly grew, my visits home became fewer and farther between. Eventually, Nate Collins came to confront me a few times. He'd always respected me, but blood is blood, and Anna was still his sister. I still remember what he said. George, you've got another woman out there, and Anna's been swallowing that for weeks. But now she's about to give birth, and you're still not stepping up. That's not right, man. I didn't argue. Just offered a few vague words to brush it off. The Collins family was powerful, sure, but my company had grown into a force of its own. They weren't in a position to push too hard anymore. It wasn't until Anna gave birth that I finally made an appearance, bringing Selina with me to the postnatal care center. The air was thick the moment we stepped in. The Collins family no longer hid their disapproval, it was written all over their faces. Tense, cold, polite only in form. Anna lay in bed, pale but composed, a bittersweet smile tugging at her lips. George, come take a look at the baby, she said softly. I let out a cold laugh. Why would I? That child isn't mine. She froze, the color draining from her face. What are you talking about? George, I've never been with anyone else but you, how could it not be yours? I met her eyes, unflinching. I told you from the start, divorce was the cleanest, most respectful way out. But you chose the low road. You chose to manipulate. So don't blame me for how this ends. I pulled out my phone, tapped open a familiar video file, and tossed it onto the bed beside her. Everyone in the room leaned in, Anna's parents, Nate, the nurses. The video played, loud and clear. Anna on the beach. Henry rubbing sunscreen on her bare back. Laughing. Touching. I looked back at them, my voice icy. I did the math. The timeline doesn't add up. That child isn't mine, and you all know it. Mr. Collins clenched his jaw. Then why the hell didn't you say something earlier? I did, I said calmly. She's the one who threw dignity out the window. I gave her a chance. I took out my phone again and said, you can see for yourself. Henry's voice was clear on the screen, Anna, since you are pregnant with my child, you should stay with George. When the child is born, you can slowly give him drugs little by little, let him die slowly, and in the end, all his property will be ours. George is very smart, what if he finds out? Then I'll prepare something, things that make it look like I've always loved him. Photos, journals, sweet little mementos, whatever it takes. I paused the video, slipped my phone back into my pocket, and turned to Anna. You know, I said, voice low, what I really want to understand is, what did you ever see in Henry? After a long silence, she let out a bitter, broken laugh. One mistake, she whispered, led to 100 more. She let out a shaky breath and continued. It started with him drugging me. He recorded it, used the footage to blackmail me. After that, I was just trapped. And you, my own family, everyone was on your side. Even my parents told me if I divorced you, I wouldn't be welcome in the Collins family again. So I tried to hold on to what I could, and that meant taking you down. I turned toward the rest of the Collins family. I'll be filing for divorce. I assume there's nothing left to discuss. They said nothing. But I could see it in their eyes, the blame, the resentment. They thought I should have come forward earlier. That maybe I could have prevented all of this. But why? Because someone tried to destroy me, am I obligated to be kind to someone because they are trying to destroy me? The divorce was finalized not long after. And then, just as expected, the Collins family began moving against me in secret, trying to undercut my business, sabotage my clients. But they didn't know I was ready for them. With Mr. Vanderbilt's help, I orchestrated a setup that cost the Collins family a fortune. One misstep after another, and we began systematically dismantling their empire, piece by piece. Henry was part of that downfall too. We sent him abroad under a false opportunity, straight into a country where Mr. Vanderbilt had deep connections. He was arrested not long after. He didn't die, but what came next might have been worse. They broke him down slowly, relentlessly. Every day became a new kind of hell. As for the Collins family, within 6 months, they completely collapsed. And Anna. Anna jumped from a rooftop in despair. Before she died, she called me one last time. Her voice was weak, almost childlike. George, it was Henry. He ruined me. If he hadn't drugged me, none of this would have happened. But I didn't answer. Because if she hadn't opened that door in the first place, Henry would have never had the chance to walk through it. At the end of the year, I married Selena. And just like that, a new life began. A clean start. Second story. When I threw my position ID card into the trash can, there were exclamations from the press conference and my colleagues looked at me in surprise. After all, I'd poured years of my life into this project, sleepless nights, relentless deadlines, pushing myself until my body started breaking down. But then, something shifted. As if a collective realization had dawned, people started nodding, giving me a thumbs up, whispering words like gracious, selfless, and remarkably composed. Everyone, that is, except Anna. She stood on stage, her face clouded with frustration. I met her glare without flinching, offering no explanation. I didn't owe her one. Anna had always loathed office romances. In the 6 years we'd been married, not a soul at the company had ever known. I'd asked her countless times to at least acknowledge me publicly. She'd always brushed it off, saying, as the boss, I need to set an example. She'd once promised, just once, that when the product was finally launched, she'd tell the world about us. Instead, she handed everything I'd worked for to someone else, as casually as tossing away a receipt. As the crowd began to eye Henry with thinly veiled doubt, Anna finally snapped. George, she called out sharply, what the hell is wrong with you? I smiled faintly. Love, it turns out, means nothing when someone else shows up at the right moment with the right story. I didn't bother responding. I simply turned and walked out. This product launch? It was only possible because I worked myself to the brink, leveraging every connection I had in the industry, calling in favors from top engineers, racing against time to upgrade every core component. I'd passed out more times than I could count from exhaustion. All so Anna could bask in the spotlight today. Now that I have completely given up on her, I naturally won't continue to create opportunities for others. Sure, the development phase was almost over, but with Henry? That guy was all charm and no substance. Give him 3 more years, and he still wouldn't finish the work I left behind. After I went out, I rode the old second-hand electric motorcycle that Anna generously gave me. I smiled bitterly. She'd always controlled our finances. I'd brought up getting a simple car more times than I could remember. Every time, she shot me down. We already have one. Why waste the money? Do you really need to keep up with other people that badly? And yet, in 6 years of marriage, she'd never let me ride with her. said it might raise eyebrows. I never complained. I told myself she was just being professional, for the company's sake. Until the day Henry came back. And she handed him the keys to a brand new Maybach. That was the moment I finally understood. She never intended to make space for me, because there was never a place for me in her heart. I was numb, hollowed out, just planning to head home, pack my things, and disappear from this farce. But then, a brand new Maybach screeched to a stop in front of me, blocking my path. The window rolled down, and there he was, Henry, grinning like a man who thought he'd already won. "George," he said, his tone dripping with mockery, "you really thought Anna would ever go public about you? Look at you, riding that pathetic little scooter. What a joke." He chuckled, full of smug satisfaction. "Good thing she introduced me as her boyfriend today. If it had been you, people would have died laughing." He was always like this, provoking me on purpose, pushing buttons until I snapped, then turning around to play the victim. It was his favorite game, stir the pot, then act wounded so Anna would come running. Most of our fights over the years had started because of him. And now? I couldn't even muster the energy to respond. Before I could leave, Anna appeared out of nowhere. Right on cue, Henry suddenly revved the engine and scraped the car against a utility pole. "George, are you okay?" he called out dramatically, stepping out of the car like some kind of concerned hero. "Oh my God, I didn't see you on that electric motorcycle. This is all my fault." Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, he added, "I know you're upset I got the credit today, but you shouldn't have swerved into my lane like that. What if something serious had happened? I'd feel guilty for life." He hurried over, feigning concern, reaching toward me like he actually cared. I didn't respond that I had enough of his tricks and just wanted to ride away on my electric motorcycle. But the next second, Anna stormed up and kicked me, hard, sending me and the electric motorcycle crashing to the pavement. "If you want to die so badly, then go ahead and die," she spat out. "Stop pestering Henry." One glance at the scene would have told her who had actually veered off course. But she didn't even bother to look. That moment sealed it for me. The last flicker of hope inside me died. Henry knelt beside me, pretending to help. I pushed him away in anger, and he immediately fell to the ground, groaning in mock pain. A performance so laughably bad, and yet somehow, she still fell for it. Anna slapped me without saying a word, then frantically hugged Henry in her arms. She raced him to the car, ran several red lights, and sped off toward the hospital. I stood there, watching them vanish, and all I could think about was the night I drank myself into a bleeding ulcer for the company's sake. Anna had handed me a bottle of water and some antacids and told me to tough it out. That was all I'd ever been to her, an afterthought. I gave a dry laugh, picked up my electric motorcycle from the sidewalk, and rode home in silence. That night, Henry updated his social media. "Falling down's not so bad, especially when your girlfriend rewards you with a fancy dinner." The photo he posted said it all, Anna, smiling sweetly, feeding him like he was the love of her life. Expressionless, I typed a single comment beneath the post, "Wishing you both the best." Moments later, my phone rang. Anna. I assumed she was calling to scold me for ruining their romantic evening. Would have been on brand. But instead, her voice came soft, almost coaxing. "George, you know what kind of person Henry is. He's just immature. In a few years, when he's older, I'll make your relationship with me public." She continued, the lead engineer title, "It's just for appearances. Everyone knows you're the one running the show. The team still reports to you. Nothing really changes." I let out a flat, no reaction, no anger. Just numb indifference. That's how it always went with Anna, one slap followed by a sugar cube. 6 years of that routine. I was tired. She must have sensed it in my silence. There was a pause, then she added, "I left a gift for you in the drawer. A little peace offering. Please don't make this into something bigger." I opened the drawer and pulled out a fancy gift box, wrapped with care, elegant and expensive. But right there on the label, clear as day, "To Henry." Of course. It wasn't meant for me. That's why she'd sounded so hesitant, because even her so-called gesture of kindness had someone else's name on it. I didn't argue. Didn't say a word. Just ended the call and tossed the gift box straight into the trash without even opening it. Then I pulled out my cell phone and called the company that had been trying to poach me. I said calmly but firmly, "I have made up my mind. I can start work next month." As one of the top electric vehicle companies in the country, they'd been courting me for years, offers, bonuses, promises that kept getting bigger with every passing season. But I never wavered. Not once. I kept turning them down, year after year, just to stay by Anna's side. This time, they didn't even hesitate. The moment I said yes, they locked it in: director of engineering, full benefits, a new house, a car, everything taken care of. And just like that, a weight settled in my chest. I've been married for 6 years and I've never felt more valued, and Anna has never valued me more. This company that barely knew me gave me more respect and support than the woman I gave everything for. I still remember how it all started, how I threw away a secure executive offer just because Anna once casually said she dreamed of becoming a CEO. Just one offhand remark, and I reshaped my entire life around it. I started from scratch. Sleepless nights in the lab, endless networking dinners, pitching to investors until I couldn't stand straight. I worked myself into illness building something from the ground up, just to hand her a crown she hadn't earned. She did nothing, and I put her in the CEO seat. And I am willing to be a behind-the-scenes developer. I gave her everything she wanted. In the end, it was all for someone else to enjoy. But I'm done living like that. From now on, I'm living for myself. That night, I booked my flight. Submitted my resignation. Before shutting it all down, I forwarded Anna the final development notes and the full pricing strategy for the car. It was everything she needed to finish what I'd started. Now, we're even. As I packed my things, I stumbled across boxes of memories buried deep in the back of my closet: matching shirts, matching underwear, couple bracelets, photo albums. Anna had picked them all out over the years. Now, they were covered in dust. Forgotten. Maybe that dust started gathering the day Henry came back. I remembered the old apartment, the two of us curled up on the couch, watching fireworks through the window. The nights she stayed by my side when I was sick. The promises we made, whispered in the dark. But those nights slowly gave way to her late returns. To weekend trips with Henry. To silence. Even when I was bedridden, she didn't come home. I guess love really can change. I used to ask her why everything between us had become so cold, so hollow. All I ever got in return was contempt. Disdain. After all these years, I still don't understand how you're less mature than Henry in every way, she once snapped. Henry has potential. What's wrong with me giving him a little more support? I'm investing in his growth, for the company's future. Can you stop being so petty for once? I stared down at the photo album in my hands, the one that once meant something, and suddenly, it just felt ridiculous. I tossed it into the trash without a second thought. A soft buzz came from my phone. It was a message from Anna. Working late again. I won't make it for our anniversary dinner this year, let's celebrate next year instead. I didn't reply. Just quietly cancelled the flower delivery and the candlelit dinner I'd spent the afternoon preparing. At least this time she had the decency to send a message. Usually, she just stood me up without a word. I scrolled through my phone, numb and detached, looking for something to distract myself. The top headline caught my eye. Powerhouse CEO caught strolling the beach with mystery man, romance under the fireworks. I didn't even need to open the article. The thumbnail said it all. Anna and Henry, laughing, walking barefoot in the sand, fireworks blooming behind them like some perfect romantic movie. I gave it a like. Why not? Let the world celebrate their picture-perfect love. Then I took a long, hot shower. Got dressed. Went out for drinks. And on the way back, I stopped by a print shop to run off a few copies of the divorce papers. It was past midnight when I finally stumbled home, half drunk and blissfully detached from everything that used to weigh me down. But the second I pushed open the door, I saw her, Anna, waiting in the dark, arms crossed, her face like a thundercloud. So now you've got the guts to go out and fool around, huh? She snapped. I let out a yawn, a little surprised. So she actually came home tonight. Usually, if anything even remotely involved Henry, she'd stay out all night, glued to his side like he couldn't breathe without her. I didn't say a word. Just walked straight toward the bedroom. But she grabbed my arm before I could get there. You really went out partying on our anniversary? She snapped. While I was working overtime, still thinking about coming home to spend it with you. Is this what being a husband means to you, George? That's your idea of responsibility? Responsibility? She had the audacity to say that, like she hadn't spent our anniversary lighting fireworks on the beach with another man. Like I hadn't just seen the whole thing plastered across the internet. She lied so effortlessly, it didn't even make her blink. All those years I waited up for her, alone in the dark, only to be told I was too clingy, too immature, too distracting. That I should focus more on work and stop needing so much from her. Now that I've stopped caring, suddenly I'm the villain again. I gave a disinterested then headed toward the bed, ready to sleep. But she wasn't done. She yanked me back up, eyes cold and fixed on mine. I haven't showered yet, she said. Come wash with me. Once upon a time, that kind of request would have made me drop everything. I'd have followed her in without hesitation, gently washing her back, kissing away the day like it was our own secret ritual. Now? It felt like a joke. Like she was grasping for scraps of intimacy to keep a house already crumbling. I noticed the faint bruise near her collarbone, the unmistakable imprint of someone else's lips. A wave of revulsion hit me. I shoved her away without thinking. I already showered. Go take yours alone. She stared at me, stunned. Like she couldn't believe I'd dare reject her. All this over me being a little late on our anniversary, she snapped. I told you I was working, what the hell are you blowing up about? You went out drinking, did I say a word about that? Is this really the kind of attitude you have toward me now? And then she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Once upon a time, I'd have run after her. Apologized, begged, said it was my fault just to keep the peace. Now? I just crawled into bed, pulled up the covers, and drifted off into the best sleep I'd had in months. The next morning, I woke up naturally, no alarms, no tension, just peace. I made myself a beautiful solo breakfast, plating it with care. Eggs just the way I liked them, fresh coffee, and warm toast. I was just about to take my first bite when I realized something strange. Anna was home. That had never happened before. Not unless I begged, apologized, and practically groveled for forgiveness. Without that ritual, she usually wouldn't set foot back inside. With a resigned sigh, I pushed the plate toward her. Only then did her expression soften a little. That's when I noticed something on the table, a Porsche car key. My chest tightened involuntarily. That model, it was my favorite. I'd mentioned it to her so many times over the years. I wasn't the type to ask for much, but that car? That was one thing I'd truly wanted. She'd always brushed it off. Said it wasn't practical, said there was no need to waste money on toys. Noticing the shift in my expression, Anna gave a strained smile and said awkwardly, "Oh, those are for Henry. It's his birthday gift. I'll get you one next time." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Of course. Why would she ever come back to me? I forced a smile, nodding slowly, and slid 2 documents across the table. There are 2 documents that require your signature. She grabbed the papers with a scowl. I just started being nice to you, and now you're already pushing your luck. She signed the first one, my resignation, without even glancing at the details. Like it was just another formality. Something routine. Even though I'd anticipated it, my heart still twisted for a second. Then came the second document. She signed that one, too, her pen moving quickly, carelessly. Only after the ink had dried did she pause. Her fingers froze mid-motion. She realized something was off. This is a divorce document. Anna's face twisted with fury as she slammed the divorce papers against my chest. Oh, so this is your little stunt now? Playing the divorce card to scare me? You think I won't sign it? She jabbed a finger at the documents. Well, guess what, I already did. Happy now? I smiled calmly. Thank you. My composure only seemed to make her angrier. I'm giving you one last chance, she snapped. Tear that agreement up right now, and I'll pretend none of this ever happened. I didn't respond. I simply slid the papers neatly into a file envelope and sealed it. That pushed her over the edge. Fine. Have it your way, she shouted. You've got guts, George. Let's see how long that lasts, don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. She didn't even glance back, so sure, so absolutely certain that I'd chase her down like always, beg for forgiveness, play the obedient husband. But this time, she was wrong. I spread my hands indifferently, then rode my electric bike to the company to pack my personal belongings. When I arrived, something felt off. The entire entrance was swarmed with people, reporters, employees, customers. Chaos. I asked someone nearby what was going on. Turns out, Henry's newly launched car model, the one he proudly unveiled at the press event, was being sold at a staggering $1 million price tag. Not only that, he'd completely bypassed the final safety inspection protocols I'd outlined in my handover. The result? A string of accidents within 24 hours. Multiple malfunctions. Several crashes. And worse, fatalities. All because they ignored my recommendations. All because they thought they knew better. I stood there for a moment, watching the panic unfold, and felt nothing. It wasn't my problem anymore. They'd built their house of cards, and now it was collapsing on their own heads. I turned away and walked inside, ready to collect the last of my things and move on. Through the crowd, Henry spotted me immediately and shouted at the top of his lungs, He's the chief engineer. If you want to find someone responsible for a safety failure, he's the one in charge." I turned, uninterested, and kept walking. But he rushed over and blocked my path. "You think you can just walk away after this mess?" he barked. "You owe our customers an explanation. You're the one who let them down." He raised his voice, righteous and theatrical, and the crowd around him ate it up. "He's right. Scumbags like you deserve to burn in hell. Pay up. Take responsibility. Don't even think about leaving until we get answers." I scanned the sea of angry faces, then looked to Anna, standing quietly beside Henry. She didn't say a word. No defense. No clarification. Nothing. And just like that, the last bit of anything I'd ever felt for her turned to ash. I turned toward Henry and calmly pulled out my phone. With a tap, the video from the product launch began to play, Anna's voice loud and clear over the speakers. "This is Henry, the man behind the product, the lead engineer responsible for bringing this innovation to life." I held the screen up for everyone to see. "That was your public statement, wasn't it, Anna? You introduced him to the world as the lead engineer. So what now? He takes the credit when things go right, but blames a regular employee like me when things fall apart?" That was all it took. The crowd turned instantly. "Yeah. We saw the live stream. Millions did." He said nothing. Anna said Henry was the one in charge. "You think we're stupid?" People pulled out their phones, digging up clips, screenshots, receipts. Within minutes, someone was already calling the police. Anna's calm facade cracked. She hurried forward, hands raised. "Everyone please, just stay calm. I promise we'll give you a proper explanation." Then she spun toward me, eyes sharp with desperation. "George. Did you sabotage the product during the final handover? Is this your doing? I can't believe you'd stoop so low." I smiled but said nothing. That only made her angrier. "You're going to fix this," she hissed. "You'll finish the post-launch corrections now. Or I'll fire you on the spot." I let out a soft chuckle and held up the document I'd been keeping in my bag, her signature staring right back at her. "My apologies," I said. "But I'm no longer an employee of your company." I tossed the signed resignation onto the table between us. "Looks like that problem's yours now." Anna stared at me, wide-eyed and shaken. No, this can't be real. I never agreed to let you resign. You had no right to make that decision without my permission." I let out a slow, cold laugh. Typical Anna, still convinced the world revolves around her. 6 years of marriage, and not once did she ever see me as an equal, let alone a husband. To her, I was just convenient. A man she could summon when needed and dismiss when not. She always assumed I owed her everything, that it was my duty to sacrifice, to stay, to serve. And for years, I did. I gave everything for her dreams. 8 long years of relentless work, sleepless nights, endless firefighting behind the scenes, all for her. Because I loved her. But what I failed to realize back then, was that love, when it's one-sided, is just a slow suicide. The more I gave, the more she took. Until she didn't even hesitate to hand everything I built to another man right in front of an audience. But now? Now I don't love her anymore. And without that love, she has no power over me. Her threats, her outrage, they were just noise. Anna's voice cracked into a scream. "You can't just walk away like this. Who gave you permission to resign?" Before I could answer, Henry stormed over and snatched the resignation papers off the table, tearing them into shreds. "Anna, he's bluffing. There's no way a key executive can resign without your explicit approval. If you didn't sign off on it, then this whole thing is fake." Then he turned on me, full of self-righteous fury. "What kind of pathetic trick are you trying to pull? You think forging a resignation will get you off the hook? You really think you can worm your way out of this mess that easily, George? You're delusional. But I didn't even flinch. I simply reached into my jacket and pulled out another copy of the resignation, crisp, clean, ready to go. By all means, I said, holding it out with a grin, tear away. I've got plenty more. And if your hands get tired, I'll help you shred a few. And by the way, I added, my voice laced with sarcasm, I wouldn't dare call myself a core figure of this company. That's your title now, remember? You've managed to claim the lead engineer role without doing a damn thing. That kind of talent must be extraordinary. So, Henry, since you're clearly the genius behind the product, why don't you go ahead and finish the final development work? Or is there a problem? I paused and tilted my head. Wait, don't tell me, you don't actually know how. His face darkened, a flush of red creeping up his neck, jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might snap. Anna's face twisted with rage as she saw Henry humiliated in front of everyone. Without thinking, she stormed toward me, eyes blazing. Enough, she shouted. You've been in charge of this project all along, and now you stand here mocking him? Do you have any idea how much Henry's sacrificed just to clean up your mess? Get on your knees and apologize to him. And then get back to work, finish the damn car. I let out a cold laugh. Ah, so now she found her voice, so quick, so fierce, all for Henry. Funny, isn't it? We were married for 6 years, yet not once, did she ever defend me like that when things went wrong. Every time a colleague grumbled about setbacks in development, she stayed silent. Or worse, she'd join the chorus, pointing fingers at me in front of everyone, piling on the pressure. And I, fool that I was, thought she was just being objective. That she believed in professionalism, that she wanted to push me to grow. But looking back now. God, how naive I was. Anna took a step closer, voice sharp and commanding. Well? What are you waiting for? Get back to work. I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply opened the folder again, flipping to the signature page of the resignation agreement, and held it up in front of her. Ms. Anna, I said evenly, maybe you should take a good look. That's your signature, signed just this morning. Or did you forget already? I tilted my head slightly, my tone smooth but laced with disdain. Of course, I wouldn't expect someone as important as you to remember something so minor. After all, I'm just a nobody, hardly worth your attention. Anna's expression cracked. Her eyes locked onto her own handwriting, staring like she'd seen a ghost. No, this can't be. She sounded breathless. Uncertain. Like reality had finally started slipping through the cracks of her delusion. The moment I finished speaking, Anna snatched the resignation agreement from my hand, flipping through it again and again, as if rereading it could somehow make it disappear. I gave a dry laugh. What's wrong, Ms. Anna? Thinking about tearing it up again? Don't worry, that's just a copy. The original's still with me. Rip as many as you like, it won't change a thing. There was no denying it anymore. She finally understood, I was done. Severed. Completely free from this cold, heartless company. George, she shouted. That's what you had me sign this morning? Your resignation? Her voice cracked with disbelief. After everything we gave you, after everything I've done for you, you repay us like this? How could you be so ungrateful? I stared at her in stunned silence. Ungrateful? She really had the audacity to say that? The very company I'd built from the ground up with my own 2 hands, she'd handed a chunk of its shares to Henry without even blinking. And me? I got nothing. Not even a conversation. And now she dared to ask what she'd done wrong? I remembered when I confronted her about that decision. She smiled and said, what's mine is yours, we're a couple, George. The company is ours. It doesn't matter whose name the shares are under. But if it truly was ours, why was I never part of the decision-making? Why was I never respected enough to even be consulted? Because in her eyes, I was never her equal. Just the guy who made things work behind the scenes. Someone she could count on but never acknowledge. I'm ungrateful? I said, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. You really have no idea what I gave up for this company, do you? Maybe you've been too busy playing queen to notice. But if you're curious, go ask someone, anyone in this building. Ask them what I sacrificed. Ask them how many nights I worked until I collapsed. How many times I pushed myself to the brink of burnout. And what did I get in return? I stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. You stood in front of the press and handed everything I built to another man, just like that. You didn't even hesitate. Anna's voice trembled. I didn't mean, Henry is talented. Putting him in that position was the best decision for the company. You could have been more understanding. I let out a bitter laugh and raised my hands in mock surrender. More understanding? I literally resigned and cleared the stage for him. I stepped aside so he could have his moment, his space, his title. Isn't that generous enough for you? Anna's hands were shaking with rage, her voice trembling as she snapped. You're twisting everything. You started this project, you should be the one to finish it. I scoffed, unimpressed. Oh, come on. Isn't Henry supposed to be the brilliant mind here? The exceptional talent? Are you telling me your genius can't even handle the final stage of a project? I stepped aside to give him room to shine, and now you're accusing me for not cleaning up after him? That's rich. Henry's face turned scarlet. Around us, murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Colleagues started whispering, exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from confusion to thinly veiled contempt. Some even began to chuckle softly, others rolled their eyes, one or two didn't bother hiding their smirks. The air was heavy with humiliation, and Henry felt every bit of it. Unable to take it, he quickly switched tactics, his voice softening, his demeanor shifting into full-blown victim mode. It's okay, Anna, he said meekly. If George doesn't want to help, I'll manage. I believe I can finish it. Anna's expression melted into tenderness, her eyes filled with pity as she looked at him like he was made of glass. Of course I believe in you, Henry, she said gently. But you shouldn't have to carry this burden. This was his responsibility from the start. Then her gaze turned to me, ice cold, sharp as a knife. George, she said, her voice low and steely, I'm giving you one last chance. Finish the job. Complete the development. Then you can walk away. She paused, her lips tightening. Otherwise. I raised an eyebrow. Otherwise what? She inhaled slowly, her chest rising with tension. Otherwise. I'll divorce you. I almost laughed. That threat, once so heavy, now felt like nothing more than a punchline to a bad joke. The moment the words left Anna's mouth, the room went dead silent, before erupting in stunned disbelief. Wait, what? Anna and George are married? No way. Are you serious? How did no one know this after all these years? Unbelievable. They've been married this whole time and never said a word? 6 years of marriage, buried in secrecy, only to be exposed at the moment of divorce. The irony was brutal. I was just saying George was being unreasonable, someone muttered, but now it all makes sense. No wonder he quit. Who could put up with this? Exactly. The man works his ass off for years and gets nothing, then some new guy strolls in and takes all the credit just by batting his eyelashes. I'd leave too. This is disgusting. Honestly, screw this company, I don't want to stay here either. What began as murmurs turned into a slow-boiling uprising. Most of the people around us were the old team, the ones who built this company with me from the ground up. Many had long held their grievances, and now, with everything out in the open, their discontent burst to the surface. One by one, people started voicing their frustration. Some even announced they were quitting on the spot. But Anna wasn't paying attention anymore. She stepped closer, eyes fixed on me. George, she said coldly, this is your last chance. Don't say I didn't warn you. I smirked, folding my arms. Anna, did you forget something? I said casually. You already signed the divorce papers this morning. Your signature's right there, in your own handwriting. And now you're trying to threaten me with divorce? That's honestly kind of hilarious. Her face darkened, the color draining from her cheeks. Don't push me, George, she snapped. Let's just pretend none of this happened. If you get back to work right now, we can move on. We're still husband and wife. The crowd around us began to stir again, this time with disgust. George, don't do it, one of my colleagues called out. You deserve better. A woman like that isn't worth your time. Anna whipped around, her face livid. You're fired. Don't bother showing up tomorrow. The tension in the room thickened instantly. Gasps and whispers followed. But this time, it wasn't fear in people's eyes, it was contempt. And Anna, for the first time, looked like she was beginning to lose control of everything. One of my colleagues scoffed and stepped forward, eyes filled with disdain. If it weren't for George covering our wages out of his own pocket and taking us out for meals on weekends, I'd have walked out of this dumpster fire of a company ages ago. We work ourselves into the ground every month for scraps, all while kissing your ass just to keep our jobs. Now we have a new employee who can boss us around like we're interns. He can't even read a basic development flowchart, and we're expected to follow his lead? I've had enough of this insult. His words hit hard, because everyone knew they were true. Immediately, several more colleagues stepped forward and handed in their resignations, some of the best engineers in the company. People who had been here since day one. Anna looked stunned. Frozen in place. For a moment, she didn't seem to know how to respond. Then, panic set in. Anyone who walks out now, I swear, you'll get nothing. Not a single dime. Laughter broke out across the room. Oh please, someone muttered, what difference would that make? With the peanuts you pay us, whether we get it or not doesn't even matter. Anna's face darkened even further. You're all abandoning your posts in the middle of a crisis. You'll be held responsible for what happened today. That was the final spark. You want us to take the fall? Another engineer snapped. The only reason the final testing wasn't done was because certain people decided they wanted the credit without doing the work. Everyone turned their heads, eyes landing squarely on Henry. He insisted that everything had to be done according to his process, said another, even though he knew nothing. He blocked our opinions and pushed forward the project without preparation. That's why it became such a big deal. Try pinning this on us, and I swear, we'll take you to court. Right. George's original pricing was $280,000, not $980,000. But Henry wanted to mark it up to rake in fast profits. And to hit the deadline, he skipped the final safety tests entirely, just brushed them off like they didn't matter. Now people are dead, and they're trying to blame us. You think we're just easy targets? Think again. At that, people started pulling out their phones and documents, laying all the evidence out for everyone to see, meeting notes, emails, audit logs, product testing reports. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Even the victims' families, who had been unsure and hesitant moments ago, now stood in stunned silence, connecting the dots for themselves. Then one by one, they began to speak. We're sorry, one said to me. We didn't know. I'm calling the police, another said, already dialing. The mood turned. Henry's eyes darted nervously toward the exits. He took a small step back, trying to retreat, only to find himself surrounded by the crowd. There was nowhere left to run. Really? Someone in the crowd called out, voice thick with sarcasm. You think you can just walk away like that? No apology, no explanation, that's your company's idea of accountability? Anna rushed to save face, forcing a nervous smile as she stepped forward. Please, everyone, I assure you, we will give a full and proper explanation. This matter won't be swept under the rug. But Henry's face went pale the moment she said that. Panic flooded his voice. Anna, you can't just leave me hanging like this. I have no one else, only you. And just like that, the tide turned again. Anna's expression hardened. Her voice, for the first time in public, turned ice cold. Shut up, Henry. This is all your fault. If you hadn't been so arrogant and reckless, none of this would have happened. You've cost the company millions. I'm officially announcing, starting tomorrow, you're no longer employed here. And not only that, our legal team will be holding you personally responsible for the damages and compensation owed to the victims. A perfect performance. Throw the scapegoat under the bus. Cut her losses. Walk away clean. So much for love. But none of it mattered to me anymore. I'd seen enough. I turned to leave, not wanting to waste another second in their chaos. But before I could take a full step, Anna reached out and grabbed my arm. George, please. I was wrong, she said, almost pleading now. Come back. We need you. I need you. The company can't survive without you. Then she turned to the very colleagues who had just threatened to walk. I promise, she said, louder now, everyone's salary will be doubled. I only ask that you stay and work alongside George again, to rebuild, to thrive, like we once did. Of course she'd say that. A last-ditch effort, playing the only card she had left. And from the corner of my eye, I saw it was working. Some of the staff were already exchanging unsure glances, weighing the offer. I let out a quiet breath and cut through the silence. I'm afraid you've forgotten something, I said coldly. I no longer work here. And I'd appreciate it if Ms. Anna would stop trying to involve me in company business. Then I turned to the crowd, the people I'd once fought beside, day and night. But for those of you looking for a change, I added with a faint smile, I have applied for the position of Director of Research and Development at our competitor. If you are interested, please contact me. The room burst into laughter and cheers. Relief, joy, vindication. For the first time in years, the weight was gone from my shoulders. Wherever George goes, I go too, one of my colleagues said with a grin. What can I say, we've worked together too long. I can't imagine following anyone else. I turned slightly, just in time to catch Anna glaring at me, eyes burning with disbelief. George, she snapped, her voice strained, do 6 years of marriage really mean nothing to you? I looked at her calmly. Stop painting yourself as the victim all the time, Anna, I said softly. Let me ask you just one thing. 6 years as husband and wife, did you ever truly love me? She didn't hesitate. Of course I loved you. I gave a faint, bitter smile. Loved me? I echoed. You loved me so much that in 6 years, you never once wanted to acknowledge me publicly. You loved me so much that you gave away the company I built from scratch, handed pieces of it to Henry like it was nothing. You loved me so deeply that you stood in front of an entire press conference and declared him your partner, handing over everything I worked for without a second thought. If that's your version of love, then I'm sorry, it's not a kind of love I can afford to accept anymore. That was the moment it finally hit her, the panic, the realization. For the first time, she saw it clearly, I wasn't coming back. I'd spent years as her shadow, her fallback, her silent laborer. I was exhausted, drained to the core. All I wanted now was to walk away, as far and fast as I could. Anna lunged forward, clutching my arm, desperation written all over her face. George, please. You can't leave. If you go, the company will fall apart. I'll fall apart. Please, just help me one last time. For the sake of everything we've been through. I gently pulled her hand off my sleeve. Don't beg me, I said quietly. Beg Henry. I turned away. She tried to stop me again, but this time, it was too late. The police had arrived. After giving my full statement and handing over the evidence to clear my name, I was free to go. Whatever Anna tried to say afterward, whatever excuses or denials she hurled out, it didn't matter anymore. The company we once built together? According to the divorce settlement, half of it now legally belonged to me. The other half, Anna had to liquidate it to compensate the families of the victims. In the end, everything unraveled. Anna tried to dump the entire mess on Henry, thinking she could sidestep justice. But the law has no favorites. Henry turned on her in the blink of an eye, dragging her down with him. She didn't escape the consequences. As the police led her away in handcuffs, she made one last desperate plea. George, please. I really did love you. Please don't leave me. Don't let it end like this. But I'd heard that lie too many times to believe it anymore. All I gave her was one final sentence. Never meet again. And that was the closure I owed myself, for every ounce of effort I ever gave. I started fresh, joined the new company, thrived in a position where I was respected and valued. Later, I found real love. I married again, had a child, built a life full of warmth and joy. I like to think that was life's way of making things right. As for the woman who once hurt me so deeply, I've long since forgotten her name.